Live at the Top, America First, Promise Meets Pivot, written by Fareed Zakaria. Yes, we're keeping score. The idea of America First was presented as a return to a clear-eyed foreign policy. It promised to place the interests and security of the United States above all other considerations. This approach suggested a strong nation, unapologetic in its actions and clear in its objectives. Many supporters believed this would lead to a more respected America on the global stage, with loyal allies following its decisive lead. The core principle was straightforward. American power would be used to directly benefit American citizens. Trade deals, military posture, international agreements. It was a vision of independence, breaking free from what some saw as the constraints of the old global order. This policy was a significant departure from the post-Cold War consensus. For decades, American foreign policy was built on a network of alliances and international institutions. The United States had created and led this system, believing shared security and economic integration served its long-term interests. Stuart Patrick of the Carnegie Endowment noted the new doctrine effectively declared independence from the world the United States created. This shift was not merely a change in tactics, but a fundamental rethinking of America's role. The goal was no longer to uphold a global system, but to navigate it to maximize immediate national advantage. However, this declaration of independence carried inherent risks. Critics warned America First could become America alone. Prioritizing unilateral action risked weakening partnerships that amplified U.S. influence for generations. Reduced credibility in international institutions, diminished influence in diplomatic coalitions were likely consequences. Even within the policy's base, a divide began to emerge. Commentators like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson argued true America First meant avoiding foreign conflicts entirely, questioning U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in 2025 as a betrayal of that principle. The doctrine's practical application quickly became a source of global friction. During the first 100 days of his second term, President Trump initiated a global trade war, imposing tariffs on allies and adversaries alike. He also moved to withdraw the United States from key international bodies like the World Health Organization, the Paris Agreement on climate change. These actions were intended to show American sovereignty and strength. But many partners found them disruptive and unpredictable, creating uncertainty. One analyst warned America is turning its back on the world, challenging the belief the nation could be entirely self-sufficient. The conflict in the Middle East had immediate and severe consequences for the global economy centered on the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Following U.S. strikes on Iran, Israeli strikes on Iran, global oil prices surged and natural gas prices surged. Brent crude jumped as much as 13% as markets reacted. This waterway is a critical choke point. About 20% of the world's oil passes through it, and a similar share of liquefied natural gas passes through it. When Iran retaliated by effectively closing the strait, the shockwaves were felt worldwide, threatening energy supplies and driving up costs for consumers and industries. A fragile 2-week ceasefire agreed April 7, 2026, did little to calm markets. Only a small number of ships dared transit the strait. Further attacks undermined the ceasefire. The passage remained essentially shut. The IMF's managing director warned of slower global growth, noting global oil supply had already shrunk by 13%. The crisis exposed global vulnerability to regional instability and dependence on a few key maritime routes. Economic pain extended beyond oil. Helium. Supply chains were strained and fertilizer supplies were disrupted. Amid this turmoil, European nations began to chart their own course. Having been left out of initial U.S. decision-making, they moved to secure their own interests. European officials proposed a multinational naval force to escort commercial ships and to clear mines in the Strait of Hormuz. EU leaders avoided direct military involvement, but sought to support Middle Eastern partners in energy migration and digitalization. Europe signaled it could no longer wait for Washington to lead. Iran tried to leverage the chaos with nuclear talks at a standstill. Tehran offered to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for a pause on all nuclear talks. The offer aimed to win countries desperate for relief and to drive a wedge between the U.S. and its allies. Media reported the U.S. response was largely dismissive. President Trump was unwilling to accept a deal that did not address the nuclear program. The impasse left European and Asian economies in a perilous position, caught between U.S. security demands and their urgent need for stable energy flows. President Trump's trade policies had already tested Washington's relationship with its closest allies, Canada, Australia, Japan. The Middle East crisis amplified these tensions. In Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu had strongly opposed the nuclear negotiations, threatening unilateral military action of his own. The eventual U.S.-Israeli strikes reflected a convergence of their hardline stances, but further isolated them from European partners who favored diplomacy. The result was a fragmented response to a major international crisis with allies operating on different tracks and with different information. Faced with an unpredictable U.S. foreign policy and a volatile global landscape, allies are no longer waiting for instructions from Washington. They are actively hedging their bets and building new partnerships to safeguard their security and economic stability. This represents a quiet but profound shift in the international order. European nations, for instance, are looking eastward. In February 2026, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz visited Beijing to reset relations with China. China had overtaken the U.S. as Germany's largest trading partner in 2025, with bilateral trade reaching around $296 billion. This move was a pragmatic recognition that European economic interests increasingly lie beyond the transatlantic alliance. In the Middle East, a similar recalibration is underway. Traditional U.S. partners are adapting to what they perceive as America's retrenchment. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, United Arab Emirates. While they still want the United States to be involved in regional security, they are no longer relying on it exclusively. These nations are hedging, pursuing good relations with Washington, while simultaneously developing robust economic and strategic ties with China and with Russia. This multi-aligned approach allows them to maintain flexibility and avoid being caught off guard by sudden shifts in American policy, giving them more autonomy than ever before. This strategic independence is not a rebellion, but a rational response to uncertainty. When allies feel they cannot rely on consistent coordination or consultation, they are forced to create their own backup plans. The European Union's push for strategic autonomy is no longer just a talking point. It is becoming a necessity. Discussions around a European naval force for the Strait of Hormuz deepened economic ties with countries in the Middle East, deepened economic ties with countries in Asia. Allies are building a world where they are less dependent on a single powerful partner, creating a more multipolar and complex geopolitical environment. Ultimately, this trend has significant implications for the United States. An America First policy that alienates allies may achieve short-term tactical goals, but it risks long-term strategic influence. The power of the United States has historically been magnified by its network of alliances. As these partners begin to act more independently, Washington's ability to shape global events, build coalitions, and respond to crises is diminished. The key takeaway is clear. In an interconnected world, true strength comes not just from acting first, but from acting together with trusted partners. When allies stop waiting, America may find itself leading a party of one. The knock-on effects were felt across a web of interconnected relationships. President Trump's trade policies had already tested Washington's relationship with Australia, Canada, Europe, Japan, and New Zealand. The eventual U.S.-Israeli strikes reflected a convergence of hardline stances but further isolated them from European partners who favored diplomacy. The result was a fragmented response to a major international crisis, with allies operating on different tracks and with different information. A fourth round of nuclear negotiations, scheduled for May 3, 2025 in Rome, was postponed amid rising tensions and what Iran called provocative statements. A senior Iranian official described U.S.-Iran negotiations as totally an impasse. An analyst noted the U.S. negotiated last year and again this year, and both times patience was very short, and in the middle of negotiations, Iran was attacked. Tehran later offered to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for a pause on all nuclear talks. Media reported the U.S. response was largely dismissive because the proposal did not include provisions for Iran's nuclear program. European officials floated a multinational force to escort ships and clear mines in the strait, while avoiding direct involvement in the war. They aimed to support Middle Eastern partners in energy, migration, and digitalization. Deepening ties across the Middle East and Asia advanced despite transatlantic friction. Allies are building a more multipolar, complex environment less centered on a single partner. America First still sounds powerful in a speech, but the rest of the world seems to be treating it more like America First, and we'll follow our own schedule. When allies stop waiting, leadership can start to look like a party of one. Quick plug, with a wink. Like and subscribe to Anonymous Wire for fresh updates. We'll keep the spin cycle on low.